Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 258 of the podcast for August 2nd, 2016. Joining me today is somebody who's been a guest many times here. He is Jim Huntzinger, the president and founder of Lean Frontiers. And you can go back and check out episodes 8, 15, 33, 196, and most recently, episode 251, which was audio of Jim interviewing Russ Scaffede. And I'm hoping Russ will actually be a guest on the podcast sometime later this year. Now, Jim has written 2 ebooks. The first is titled The Roots of Lean, Training Within Industry, The Origin of Japanese Management and Kaizen. And the second is Deflation, The Road to Prosperity. And we'll talk about that second book and topic in the podcast today. We're also going to talk a bit about the lean accounting and lean management topics. These are the focus of 2 upcoming summits being held jointly in San Antonio, August 25th and 26th. I hope you can join us. I'll be there giving a talk on the topic of practicing lean to kick off the event, and I'll be around that whole day. Lean Frontiers has many great events that they produce throughout the year. I hope you'll get to check one out sometime. You can go to www.leanfrontiers.com to learn more. Jim, thanks for being a guest on the podcast today. Looking back at the history here, this is actually your 5th time being interviewed here on the podcast. This is going back to our first one back in 2006, and then back in episode 251 was actually some audio you shared of yourself and Russ Scaffede talking. So thank you for once again being a guest here on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. It's hard to believe that it was 10 years ago that we did the first one.
It's episode number 8 in October 2006. So we have a lot of interesting and new things to talk about here today. For people who aren't familiar with you and Lean Frontiers, can you kind of first off reintroduce yourself or introduce yourself and Lean Frontiers for the listeners?
Sure. Jim Huntzinger, obviously with Lean Frontiers, and what Lean Frontiers is our organization is we're focused on putting on conferences and in essence really trying to build communities around niche subjects under the lean enterprise. So we started off over 10 years ago with the Lean Accounting Summit in 2005, and then also started in 2007 the TWI Summit, and then over the years have grown into a variety of events around Lean HR, Lean Management Summit, the Kata Summit, Coaching Summit that we do jointly with the Lean Enterprise Institute, and even doing a summit overseas on TWI and actually expanding it into Kata as well. So just really trying to build and develop communities and the knowledge and the learning around the different subject matters under the Lean Enterprise.
So we're going to, I think, recap some or kind of talk about some updates of some topics that we've been talking about
Sure.
for over 10 years here. But I think one of the other topics that I think we haven't talked about in previous podcasts is something you've written about, you've shared with me in the past, and have something published on what you call the deflationary economy and the lean business model. So, first off, as to delve into this, what do you mean by deflationary economy?
Yeah, I guess there's two definitions to a deflationary economy. One is from classical economics, which is the decrease of the value of currency due to manipulation, or the increase of the money and credit supply. That's classic economics. More contemporary definition, what's used more today, is deflation as a decrease in the general price level of goods and services due to productivity improvements. And that's what I'm really talking about here, not the classic one, although that is important, but the more contemporary one. So the decrease of the price of goods and services due to productivity improvements, that's certainly where the lean business model rolls in, because there's no better business model out there that accomplishes that than a lean business model. So that's the kind of the intimate direct link between the two, and really kind of where the importance lies with that link.
the norm, or correct me if I'm wrong in this, the norm, at least in modern times, has been to have a slightly inflationary economy where a little bit of inflation is considered to be a good thing, not too much inflation like the late 70s or like we see in some countries around the world. Is that the case, or what's the difference, or what's the impact? Would you consider a slightly deflationary economy through productivity improvement to be better, to be a good thing?
Yeah, I guess it would be this, and this could be probably a whole series of podcasts on its own. This subject matter is currently, and for the last really 100 years in the United States, we've had an inflationary orientated economy. If you look at things historically, and I've done a lot of research on this, some of that's in the writing I've done on deflation, but also overall economics, is if you look at the history of the United States, actually all the way back to colonial America, and I've got data back to the mid 17th century to about 1660, we actually had the prices of goods and services stayed flat, generally speaking, up until about 100 years ago, up till around 1910, 1915, and that's when prices started increasing. So the role with that is, the way the deflationary aspect of that is, but over that time from the mid 1600s up to before prices started increasing, people's incomes increased, which is why we're such a wealthy country, is even though prices stayed flat, generally speaking, people's income increased. So that in a way kind of creates what I call a quasi-deflationary economy. Even though prices are staying level, people's income are going up. But in the last 100 years, we've had our incomes going up along with prices going up. So in essence, we've left a lot of wealth on the table as a result of that.
Yeah, because if incomes are rising,
yes,
but prices are high, or purchasing power has not gone up. So, and this is where people talk about what's something. A bottle of Coke used to cost 15 cents or something, that would say, well, that's like $2 in today's money.
Yes.
Or whatever the inflationary factor is over time, right?
Yeah, whatever the inflationary factor is over time. So certainly we've gotten more wealthy just because our income has gone up higher than the inflationary rate, and most of the time over the last 100 years. But again, the downside of that is if prices would have stayed flat, then we'd have the same income as we do today, but it would have much more buying power. But the other interesting phenomenon in the research I've done on this is anytime you have a productive society, which of course in the United States we do, actually the most productive society in the history of the world, is you should always have the phenomenon going on of either prices are staying flat, so people's incomes people's incomes are going up, or prices are going down along with people's incomes going up, or some variation of those two. But in the last 100 years, we've had our incomes going up, but also prices going up. And based on a natural economy, that would not happen, which is what we show when I look at things, or what I found when I look at things historically from at least 1660, that my data goes back to until about 1910, is prices were flat as people's incomes go up because of productivity that went on. And that certainly accelerated as we came into the Industrial Revolution, and as we came into the 20th century, that productivity really started increasing at a very substantial rate.
Yeah, because that productivity was caused by, or a lot of it came from technology, transportation, electricity, computers.
Yeah, a lot of technology, but ultimately all of that came out of human ingenuity. So all technology is actually the most, ideally, and again, being in the lean community, we know this is the most prized asset, and the most improvable asset is people, as humans. So as you do that, as you develop, and that's again the linkage with the lean business model, develop people that they can be much more productive, can be much more creative, can solve problems better and at a quicker pace. Then the result of that is a substantial increase in productivity. So if you take our increase in productivity, which again, since the colonial period we've had, and it's certainly accelerated substantially in the last 150 years in particular, if you can put a business model that accentuates that, then you're just going to end up being that much more productive, and eventually, creating that much more wealth, having that much more of a robust society for everyone.
So is there a difference, though, in the dynamics, let's say, if a handful of companies in industry, let's say one amongst 10 competitors really embraces lean as not just a production model, production system, but a business model. They are able to significantly reduce their costs. They improve quality. They reduce lead times, improve delivery performance, all the things we would expect to see from lean. If you have one company in that market, I guess, if they're able to charge the same market price and they have lower costs, they have higher profit.
Yes.
Does that company then tend to try to offer a lower price to gain market share, knowing that they can be profitable, that they're going to sort of try to drive down the market price within that industry?
They can, and I guess the advantage, and even a more broad advantage, and you bring up the very good point, is when companies do that, if the company in their particular market become lean and their competitors aren't, or certainly aren't as quickly as they have, it gives them multiple options. So what these options are is what you said. They can certainly lower the price by keeping, the same margins, and obviously that's an advantage. They could actually, if the market wants it, they can keep the same price, but they're getting a higher margin per the products or services they sell than their competitors. So they're developing more capital that they can utilize in a variety of ways. And sometimes they could even drop the market price while still even increasing their margin compared to their competitors. So it gives a much more flexibility for an organization. And when you have that type of flexibility, that creates a lot of power, particularly over the long term, on how you can run your business and how you can adjust with market changes and market dynamics. Mm-hmm. And that's key. And one place to look at that where we saw that phenomenon happen to a certain degree was certainly in automotive. Certainly in automotive, just from an overall competitive standpoint. We also saw the phenomenon happen when the recession hit back in 08 and 09, just what the position was that, in this case, Toyota versus a couple of their competitors were in at the time that market hit. I mean, when that hit, certainly Toyota didn't like it because it dug into them, but they were positioned to weather that at a much more robust level.
And so, kind of thinking through dynamics within an industry, let's say, more organizations, more of those competitors are getting on board with lean. They're also reducing cost and improving performance. Mm-hmm. Where's the balance, or what's the dynamic? If we say on the one hand, value is defined by the customer, prices are set by the market. Yeah. There's also sort of that dance of like, well, if people are offering a lower price and the quality's as good or better, people are going to go to that. So is this where if lean starts becoming more the predominant way of doing things in an industry, whether it's automotive or other industries, is there going to be downward pressure on price, all other things being equal? I mean, car prices haven't come down. Arguably, we're getting more value. We're getting more features from our vehicles. I mean, what happens, within an industry as lean really becomes to take hold? Or what would happen if nationally, if lean were to become, the new conventional wisdom? Is that where you start getting into those deflationary pressures?
Yeah, and actually, your question you asked is a great question, because there's two significant dynamics there, and I'll see if I can discuss them. So one is that's why, and that's one of the reasons I got interested in looking at the economic side of things, is you have two things. Is one, you have the macroeconomic picture. So as we talked earlier, we actually have a inflationary, in a way, macroeconomic picture that the United States has been working with for the past 100 years. So that from a macro level does push up the prices of goods and services, and that's really from the classical sense of deflation or inflation in this case, where there's not a standard from the monetary in the way that's ran. So if you have more dollars in the system, then the prices are going to go up just because there's more dollars as a commodity, more dollars chasing the same number of products. So that's a upward pressure for the price. Obviously, what you're talking about from a lean perspective, that certainly does put a downward pressure from the things we talked about, as well as, gee, if I could produce a product at the at a lower cost for myself, or since I have higher margins, that's going to put a downward pressure. But also, too, the other results out of that are, gee, not only can I produce it at a lower cost, but I also can produce a higher quality product or service, and I also could have more features on it. So again, that puts two things. That puts downward pressure potentially, but you also have the upward pressure of the macroeconomic, functionality that's going on. And also, too, products will tend to go up in price, but not all products, and I'll give an example, will tend to go up price. Like you said, cars. Cars have certainly gone up in price, and you're right, the value of the car, the functions and features and quality and performance have all increased as well, even though we're paying more of a price, although you'd have to look at in an inflation calculator to see how much they've gone up per what they were, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and the value of the dollar. But there are other products that the opposite is going on, even though we have a generally inflationary economy. One of them, a good example, is your television. I'm paying the same, probably around the same price for a television that I did even 5 or 10 years ago, a TV that's substantially bigger, a substantially higher quality of the picture. I mean, I look at when I see old tube TVs now, I sit there like a sporting event and I think, gee, how did we ever watch that? It's so grainy, 5, 10, 20 years ago. Plus all the features on a TV, internet access, hooking up your computer to it and just all kinds of features. So that's certainly, electronics is one, even in our macro inflationary economy, where the prices have gone down or again stayed level with substantially better offerings.
Right, and arguably not because of lean, but just because of technology advancement, competitive pressures.
Yes.
So there's a lot of competition in the TV space. Some companies are getting out of the TV business because it's been a very low margin business.
Very low margin. Yeah, essentially. Well, so for a 32-inch TV now, you could go to Meijer, Walmart, other places, and buy a 32-inch TV for high definition TV for $150. 10 years ago, a TV smaller than that would have cost you more than that, of lower quality and lower features. So the dynamics can be a lot of times very dependent on the particular industry that you're looking at.
So let's say everybody got lean and we're having big increases in productivity. Are there problems? Are there downsides to a deflationary economy? What happens in terms of people's salaries? Would companies, instead of being under pressure to increase wages, would there be pressure to try to decrease wages? That's got to be tough psychologically. Are there problems, let's say, at the housing market if there's deflation, if there's general deflationary pressure in an economy? I mean, what are some of the problems?
If the deflationary economy is driven by productivity improvements, that will not be a problem. Now, can you have singular instances where things like that can happen? Sure. I mean, especially in a country like we live with 350 million people, and you go to different cities or different states. The local economy is different. The buying power is different. From around Los Angeles, California, to where I live in central Indiana, and things like that. So those can happen. But overall, from an aggregate level, you will not have that problem. Which again, when I went back and looked at the historical data of the United States, is where you saw the prices of goods and services being flat, but people's income going up. So even though the prices or your costs are going down, and that's just it. So with lean, again, this relates back to lean business model. With the lean business model, you are decreasing your cost of doing it, but you're not decreasing, in a sense, you're not decreasing the amount you pay your people, whether they're salary or hourly. What you're getting is a higher productivity out of them. So you're getting more output per person because you have this system and you develop these people to have that capability. So if prices going down, actually cause people to be poorer, you would not have countries like the United States or European countries or rising, economies like in Hong Kong or South Korea, or even in China now, where people's incomes are going up. So what people So if you look at the United States, United States, generally speaking, has higher productivity than any place in the world, although we also are some of the highest people paid in the world as well. So it's really a function of productivity. Now, the downside of that is, again, is from a deflationary, is looking at the classical definition of where, in a sense, you're manipulating the currency, increasing the amount of currency, which, so if you have some money in savings and the amount of currency and credit is increased, your buying power that you have saved is going down, potentially at a faster rate than maybe an interest rate you're getting, and particularly now when interest rates are low. Mm-hmm. So really, there's those two different functions. Deflationary through productivity improvements is a good thing for everybody overall, and especially over time. Like I said, but you'll always be able to find one-offs, but those are usually due to some other circumstances versus a classical deflationary where we're actually devaluing the currency.
Yeah. So what you're saying is productivity-driven deflation. I guess it would be a set of circumstances where companies are reducing costs. They wouldn't feel the need, or pressure to squeeze their employees, and I guess some of the wages are driven by their own labor market. If there's a competitive labor market, what you're saying is this lean world, if you will, could have increasing wages, reduce costs, lower prices. I mean that creates wealth and prosperity for people.
Yeah, it's wealth and prosperity. And that's a good point. Is usually labor cost, or what people are paying for labor, is a local phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Certainly, there's some level of impact at a grander scale, but generally that's a local phenomenon. So again, for example, what you're going to pay somebody in rural Iowa is going to be lower maybe per hour, and actually even a salaried person for that matter, than what you might have to pay somebody if they live in downtown Chicago. Even though they may make a higher salary in downtown Chicago, the buying power is lower just because the prices there locally for housing and transportation or other things, even maybe food, is higher. So again, usually those are local phenomenons that are going on.
All right, so let's talking about some of the current state of lean accounting.
Sure.
And I would invite people. I mean, we touched on this all the way back in episode 8. People can find if they go to leanblog.org/8. But if you can give sort of a recap real briefly around what is lean accounting and where has that movement come in the last 10 years? What's some of the current state of lean accounting?
I'd say lean accounting, and I want to say I'm giving very general definitions, but lean accounting is about how you change your accounting practices in order to better give information and particularly, but not exclusively, financial information to your organization so it can make good and valid decisions. So there's things like value stream costing is maybe somewhat at the center of that, and techniques that are used that are different from traditional costing, like overhead costing and things like that just simply give you a more accurate representation financially of what are things actually costing you. And that's obviously good to know. You want accurate information. So another aspect of it that's been around the lean accounting community is what we call accounting for lean. So what that is related, but it's really about how are the people in your accounting staff, how are they providing, again, information that is helping the organization make good decisions? And a lot of times that may not necessarily be financial information or not direct financial information. So it's really fundamentally around, at least accounting for lean or lean accounting, is how can we in the accounting part of the business, how can we give the rest of the business information that's valuable and useful for them to make good decisions as they work on the business in all aspects. If you're in manufacturing and operations, but it could be in sales, it could be in purchasing and other things. We want accurate, valid information that's as real time as we can get to make good decisions. So I'd say the state of the lean accounting community is this: there's much wider range than we would have been 10 years ago, because there are some companies now that have matured in that area pretty substantially, and some that are in the middle of it, and some that are still just beginning. There's certainly a broader range of organizations that are doing that. So the one more mature ones now do have a lot of things, like do have good value stream costing systems and functions in your organization. And what they're really doing probably now is really expanding it. And that is part of the reason why we started a couple years ago the Lean Management Summit. Mm-hmm. So the Lean Management Summit is again, what are these management systems that companies use or should be using, I guess, in the Lean organization in order to better manage the overall business. So things like Hoshin Conry, or this year we're going to have some talks on target costing, which, that's somewhat financially related, but it's really more looking at, are we reaching the thresholds of the market from, again, a pricing standpoint and our margin needs as an organization? And what are some of the tools and techniques and infrastructure that we need in our organization in order to do that effectively and move that information through the organization where it's needed, when it's needed? Mm-hmm. So that's what some of the more mature companies are working on. And again, that's one reason why we've coupled the Lean Management Summit with the Lean Accounting Summit, because it's a lot of those people that have been involved in the Lean Accounting community are the ones going, hey, we need to know how we do these other practices in our organizations in order to be more effective at the broad lean enterprise standpoint.
Yeah. And let's give some quick details about the summit. In August in San Antonio, I'll be speaking, by the way. So
we got two tremendous keynotes, you being one of them, and you're gonna talk about just a reflection of what you've seen over the past 20 years, a way of kind of how the community's grown, matured, and has yet to grow and mature as well. And
the broader lean community, because I'm barely conversational in lean accounting, but.
Yeah, from that standpoint. And the other one is going to be Steve Brenneman, who's actually the CEO of a company called Aluminum Trailer Company. He's the CEO and also founder of this company. And him and actually even their organization is definitely one of the up-and-coming organizations that have been really working hard on how do we become a lean enterprise. So just not things with lean accounting, or they're certainly doing things with TWI, training within industries, and other things, and even in their IT, but really, how does all this stuff work within those different silos, but also how do all these integrate with each other so we do act at a very effective level? Some of the things we were talking about earlier that we want to get the lean enterprise to do, how do we really become a really robust organization in all facets of our business? So he's going to talk from that standpoint.
Yeah, and the dates, again, this is in San Antonio, such a great place to visit, August 25th and 26th, the Lean Accounting Summit, the Lean Management Summit. There's some overlap, and then there's some breakout into different tracks, correct? Yeah,
some overlap. So there'll be two, they'll run concurrently, so there's two tracks for the Lean Accounting Summit and two tracks for the Lean Management Summit. And the day prior to it, the August 24th, is a workshop day. But people can register for either summit, and they're free to go and attend, whichever session they like. And that's something nice about it, because you can get a variety, of topics under both, lean accounting and lean management, and there's some overlap, as well as with just intermingling with people. I mean, that's a big part of building the community, is we want people to get to know each other, network with each other, talk with each other, not just during the 2 or 3 days of the summit, but ideally we really like them to keep those conversations going all year long and learn continually. We'll learn from each other.
Yeah, and we'll come back and we'll share the website and everything
Sure.
at the end of the podcast here in a couple of minutes. But I did want to kind of come back and talk about, when you talk about making decisions with cost accounting. That might seem like a really arcane subject to people who aren't into aren't familiar with that. I mean, I think there are a lot of really practical things to consider. I think I'm in a manufacturing company. What does it cost to make a certain product? The easy part of it, it seems, is the cost of material, the cost
Sure.
of direct labor, but then it gets really complicated, right? How do you allocate the cost of the machines? They're producing all sorts of different products. How do you allocate the cost of the building and the electricity and all the other overhead, including management? This is where cost accounting comes into play. And there's certain assumptions or decisions that lead into someone saying, okay, we think it costs us $72 to make that product. It's profitable or not? Or should we stop making a certain product? Should we expand a certain product line. Those are some of the decisions that people would make in manufacturing, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing. That's, I guess, the main, differentiation between traditional accounting and lean accounting. You're right. It's really, a lot of it really stems out of the overhead and the allocation process. And that's what companies discover is certainly they had pricing and internal cost for their products, but what they tend to find out is that information was completely inaccurate. So they're making decisions for the business, important decisions, even if they're small or particularly large decisions, based on information that's not accurate. And that's the thing with lean accounting is what it does is it helps you understand how to develop a system and your functionality that you do have accurate information about what your products and your processes are really costing you. And again, for the goal of, we want to make decisions on that, like you mentioned a number of reasons to do it. Should we be actually insourcing some products? Should we be expanding? Where should we be expanding? Was this, that's another thing that relates to this, is this piece of equipment we're considering, is it really a good investment or not a good investment? That actually even leads into the whole aspect of what I call right designing, and actually economies of scale thinking, is a lot of times we buy our systems and design our systems for economies of scale. And that's the difference with lean, is you really want to try to do things at a scale of one. How can we effectively do whatever our processes are, putting out our product, at as effectively as producing one, as 10, as 100, as 1,000, and so forth. So there's certain physical dynamics that you learn about and do well too, which also, again, makes you more productive. Because if you, in a sense, overbuy capacity, and that's what we do traditionally with process, overbuy capacity, we have this urge to try to run hard in order to, we think, falsely bring down the cost of it. But actually we don't. The cost just gets tied up in inventory or poor allocations or in capacity we purchase that ultimately we may not use because maybe the market doesn't grow into that area.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other aspect of way this discussion that's very important as well.
And I think this is an area where healthcare is far behind manufacturing around the question of how much does it cost to do a certain surgical procedure. There are some very easily knowable direct costs, and then there's a lot of overhead to allocate throughout the health system. So, I mean, I think that's going to become a really important challenge as we start looking at value-based purchasing, trying to reward people for value, and trying to steer patients or payers or employers, encouraging people to try to find lower cost care. How do we really determine what's lower cost care, and how do hospitals make similar decisions about lines of service lines that they want to expand or get into? Hospitals, it's a little bit different than manufacturing because there's a lot of care that hospitals would say we have to provide,
sure,
as opposed to choosing to. But there are a lot of types of procedures and things that are a choice where it seemed like this is a really interesting frontier for hospitals. Have you talked to hospitals and health systems about lean accounting or cost accounting and things that people are trying to do to be able to make better decisions?
A little bit. I certainly have, actually you're one of them as well, but I certainly have some colleagues that work in healthcare and are trying to work on lean activities there. There hasn't been as much traction from the accounting side in healthcare compared to, in manufacturing and even some other service industries as well, from the accounting standpoint. And my guess, it probably has some, and you may be able to articulate some of this as well, probably something to do with the functionality, because obviously in healthcare, there's a huge part of that industry is the third-party system, the payer system, the insurance system, which drives a lot of the financial and accounting procedures and how costs are allocated and moved about. And that's a functionality that's not with, when you get into manufacturing and things like that they just don't have to deal with, but the healthcare system is going to have to deal with. But you brought up, a lot of good points. If you look at manufacturing, I always call it kind of the 50% rule. If you look at the way you would implement lean from a from the way you deploy the systems and maybe some of the hardware and all that. Really, you need 50% less capital, 50% less labor, 50% less facility needs. Actually 99% less work in process and higher quality. I think you have a similar, although it's not exactly correlated, but similar situation in healthcare. There's a lot of in a way overhead costs that are put in there that they gotta deal with and allocate. With that, and I think there are some hospital systems that have done some learning. I know ThedaCare is one of them over the years, that they don't have to, in a sense, invest as much in order to get out better and higher quality, for their patients, and even safer, healthier care as well.
Yeah. Well, and maybe we'll get to have some good discussions about that with people at the summit. One other topic here, just before we wrap up here, one of the things I'm going to address in my keynote talk, this idea of practicing lean, and we hopefully we learn by doing, we get better over time. Hopefully we have people mentoring us, that we've all made mistakes in our lean journey, and we see other people make mistakes. I'm curious, what's your take on what I've dubbed, as the awkward acronym LAME, or lean is mistakenly explained, or what Bob Emiliani might call fake lean. Why do we see that happening? Why does that exist? What are some of the, if you will, the root causes of these mistakes, or things that might make us kind of shake our heads a little bit?
Yeah, from one aspect, and there are many, but one aspect I think is an understanding of capacity and capability. I think a lot of people don't, and this, even if you're not lean, I think this is a problem. Even in lean organizations, the problem not really understanding their capacity. What do they have the capability of doing right now? Because of capacity, number of people, and that relates into the capability. What are the capability of people? So we try to, organizations, and really trying to become lean. If you look at things like we want learning organizations, we want people problem solving. Well, that's really addressing both these issues. Well, first, before you can address your capacity issues, you really got to address capability, and that's developing people. That's thankfully been a lot of talk in a lot more frequent years, is how do we develop people? How do we develop people for problem solving? So that's important, to develop your people for problem solving. And this can relate back into the Lean Management Summit. How do you develop the infrastructure that allows people to develop their problem solving skills and utilize those? So once you start doing that with your people, again, people being by far the most important asset, and actually every other asset is a result of human activity, you develop people's capability in problem solving and the systems they're working with that allow them to do that better. And when you do that, as a result, you improve your capacity. So in a sense, that's productivity improvement. So not just output of your product, but the output of your people's capability. So as you improve that productivity aspect of their capability, your capacity will increase, doing more with less. And that's how good lean organizations, and you could look somebody like at Toyota, that they just get so much more out of their people because they've developed their people with better capability, and also they've worked on improving the infrastructure those people work in. So you get a double increase of this capacity that you have in your organization. I related a lot to the people that are familiar with Toyota Kata, and the work Mike Rother's done there. He has a diagram he uses in there, one with a target, your current condition and your target condition. And in between there, he usually draws kind of a circle, is this unclear territory. Well, as you help develop your people from a problem-solving standpoint, so your capacity improves in that area, they can traverse that unclear territory more effectively and faster. And again, that is a learning organization. I call it thriving in that unclear territory, where you have your people, we know where we're at, we know where we want to get to. We're maybe not quite sure how we're going to get there, but we know we will get there, and we're going to have one heck of a good time doing it. And when we get there, we'll already be able to see that next horizon or that next target condition. And you want to get your people so they thrive in that. And the reason they thrive in there is you have worked with them on developing their experience, their skills, their knowledge in order to be successful. And again, back to some of the things we've talked about, or productivity before, and the different aspects you can compare to your, or ideally your whole organization functioning in that manner, your competitors better beware. So I think understanding those things, and that's what you're really trying to achieve, and not reducing cost, just not you trying to pound things through your people by increasing output, but giving them the capability to make improvements, the capability to do things, which will by default increase their capacity to achieve things.
Mm-hmm. So do you think is the problem, I mean, one of the causes, I mean, back to the topic of lame or fake lean, does the problem come from organizations not investing enough in training and developing their people? That kind of, I mean, I see cases where, people are just thrown out there, okay, go read a book, take a online class, go do lean. Yeah,
go do lean. Yeah, go do lean. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Is a lot of times, and again, this is why it's always important to have the management on board, which has always been the biggest question for all the years I've been around in lean, is them understanding their role. It's just not about, to me, this is forcing capacity you don't have. We just need to get it done, go get it done. But saying we need to get it done, which we do, even in a lean organization, need to get it done. But what do we need to do to really achieve that and achieve that effectively? What type of training do our people need? A lot of times that doesn't mean you have to necessarily go pay for them to get training. It's just, what are the things we need to work on? And ideally, you want the training to go on with real work. I mean, that's something Toyota really strive to do, is if we can train our people to become more effective with real work, not only do they learn, but we get real work done, and then it increases their capability and capacity to get better work done quicker and more effectively. To me, it's a velocity thing. If you can get that velocity, the velocity of that learning there in place, you're going to get a velocity of a lot of your improvements going more effectively. And leaders have to understand that, and understand that that does not happen overnight. It does not happen by telling them to go do lean. It happens by them being fully engaged, walking shoulder to shoulder with their people and learning as well, and helping to remove those roadblocks, because they need to learn this themselves. Mm-hmm. And a lot of organizations, again, struggle to do that, and it isn't easy, and it does take time and persistence.
It does, and it takes patience. I think that's one of my lessons. I've tried to learn. I've tried to be more patient with people, and understanding that people might make mistakes. Maybe I can get more frustrated with people if they keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. But again, that could come from a lack of coaching, a lack of development from the companies.
I think a lot of times in lean we say reflection is important. Well, to me, this is one of the very important aspects of reflection, is really stepping back, because you've been involved with this enough. A lot of times it seems very clunky going through this, and people I work with, or people that come to our summits we talk to, it seems very clunky. And I'll suggest to them is, well, really step back and really reflect on what you've got accomplished. And typically what you find, even though it's been somewhat painful and clunky at times, and you've had a lot of seemingly failures, if you really do a good deep reflection on where you were a month ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, you really discover is, we've actually made some very good progress. Still have a long ways to go, but we've actually made a lot of progress. And again, you should look back and be, you should be humbled by it. You should be thankful for it. We have made progress. Well, okay, let's keep moving forward, because we are making more you usually make more progress in the way you feel that you're making progress, which is why the reflection aspect is important.
Right. Well, Jim, thank you for being a guest once again here on the podcast. The Lean Accounting Summit, again, is coming up in August 25th and 26th in San Antonio. Leanfrontiers.com is the website. And any other recommendations about where people can find you and Lean Frontiers online?
Yeah. Certainly, if you just Google Lean Frontiers, you'll find our website, and at the Lean Frontiers website, you'll find links to the different summits: the Lean Accounting Summit, Lean Management Summit. With who's all going to be there speaking, and the different breakouts and subject that's going to be talked about. So you can go there and find out all that information. And I appreciate you having me on here. I always very much enjoy talking with you, and look forward to having you at the Lean Accounting Summit in August, and you sharing your experience with everybody.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate you having me out there to be part of that community, and another good opportunity to see you and the rest of the team. So again, our guest has been Jim Huntzinger. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.